The morning rush hour in the city is a symphony of chaos that most commuters have learned to tune out. I was no different, standing on the crowded platform, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, mindlessly scrolling through emails that had accumulated overnight. The familiar electronic voice announced my train's arrival, and like clockwork, I positioned myself strategically by the doors, hoping to secure a spot that wouldn't require intimate contact with strangers for the next 20 minutes. It's funny how we city dwellers develop these little survival tactics without even realizing it. The subway screeched to a halt, doors sliding open to reveal a car already packed with humanity. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, immediately feeling the press of bodies adjusting to accommodate one more passenger. The air was thick with the scent of coffee, perfume, and the undeniable musk of a city waking up. I managed to find a small pocket of space near the center pole, wrapping my fingers around the cool metal as the train lurched forward. That's when I felt it. Someone stumbling slightly behind me as the train accelerated, a warm hand briefly touching my shoulder to steady themselves. "Sorry about that," came a voice, deep and slightly breathless. I turned slightly, offering the customary half-smile that acknowledged the apology without inviting further conversation, another unwritten rule of subway etiquette. But when my eyes met his, something shifted in the atmosphere of that crowded car. He was taller than me by a few inches, with dark hair that curled slightly at the temples and eyes that seemed to hold a perpetual smile. His suit was well-tailored but slightly rumpled, as if he'd been running late and dressed in a hurry. There was something immediately disarming about him, something that made me forget my rehearsed commuter indifference. "No problem," I replied, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "These trains have a mind of their own sometimes." He smiled then, a genuine expression that transformed his entire face. "Tell me about it. I've been riding this line for 3 years and still can't brace myself properly for the starts and stops." Under normal circumstances, this would be where the conversation ended. A brief exchange, then back to our respective bubbles of isolation. But as the train continued its journey, swaying and jostling us together, something unusual happened. We kept talking. I learned his name was Daniel, that he worked at an architectural firm downtown, and that he usually caught an earlier train but had overslept that morning. "Blessing in disguise," he said with a slight smile that made my stomach do an unexpected flip. As we approached his stop, Lexington Avenue, I felt a strange disappointment. Our conversation had been flowing so naturally, a rare connection in a city where most interactions were transactional at best. The train slowed. The announcement came over the speaker, and passengers began shifting toward the doors. But Daniel didn't move. He remained firmly planted beside me, our shoulders occasionally brushing as the train swayed. I glanced at him questioningly as the doors opened and closed, leaving us still standing together as the train pulled away from the station. "Wasn't that your stop?" I asked, unable to hide my curiosity. Daniel looked slightly embarrassed, a flush creeping up his neck. "It was," he admitted. "But I thought our conversation was more interesting than getting to work on time." Let me explain why this moment matters so much in the grand scheme of things. In a city of 8 million people, genuine connections are surprisingly rare. We pass thousands of faces every day, but how often do we actually see them? How often do we choose human connection over our routines, our schedules, our carefully constructed plans? Daniel's decision to miss his stop wasn't just about extending a pleasant conversation. It was an act of rebellion against the isolation that modern urban life often enforces upon us. The train was still crowded, perhaps even more so now as we picked up additional passengers at each stop. The press of bodies pushed us closer together until we were standing chest to chest, my back against the center pole. In any other circumstance, with any other stranger, this proximity would have been uncomfortable, even intrusive. But with Daniel, there was an electricity to it, a delicious tension that made each point of contact between us feel significant. "So," he said, his voice lower now that we were closer, "tell me something about yourself that isn't on your business card." I laughed at the unexpected question. "Well, I collect vintage vinyl records, but I don't actually own a record player. I just like the album art." His eyes lit up. "That's fascinating. Which is your favorite?" "Probably a 1977 pressing of Fleetwood Mac's Rumors. The cover has this ethereal quality that just captures something about the music inside, you know?" Daniel nodded enthusiastically. "I do know. There's something about physical media that digital just can't replicate. The tactile experience, the intentionality of it. As we continued talking, I became acutely aware of how the usual numbing monotony of my morning commute had transformed into something I didn't want to end. The subway car, normally just a means to an end, had become a world unto itself, with its own gravitational pull centered somewhere between Daniel and me. We passed through 3 more stations, neither of us making any move to separate despite opportunities to find more space as passengers exited. There was an unspoken agreement between us, a mutual acknowledgement that this accidental closeness was something we were both choosing to maintain. You know, Daniel said during a brief lull in our conversation, I've lived in this city for 7 years, and this is probably the most genuine interaction I've had with a stranger. I understood exactly what he meant. In a place where you can be surrounded by people, yet feel completely alone, finding someone who sees past your carefully constructed public facade is rare. It's like suddenly speaking the same language after years of miscommunication. The train jerked unexpectedly around a curve, sending me slightly off balance. Daniel's hand found my waist, steadying me with a touch that lingered a moment longer than necessary. Our eyes met, and in that moment, the crowded subway car seemed to fade away, leaving just the 2 of us in a bubble of possibility. Thanks, I murmured, not moving away from his touch. Anytime, he replied, his voice carrying a weight of meaning that extended far beyond this simple exchange. As we approached my stop, I felt a growing sense of panic. I didn't want this encounter to end, didn't want to step back into the routine that awaited me outside those subway doors. Daniel seemed to sense my hesitation. Which stop is yours? He asked. Next one, I admitted reluctantly. He nodded, a decision forming behind his eyes. Mine too, apparently. I couldn't help but laugh. Are you planning to miss every stop today? Not every stop, he replied with a grin. Just until I get your number. The boldness of his statement caught me off guard, but in the best possible way. In a dating world often dominated by apps and carefully curated profiles, there was something refreshingly direct about this approach. No algorithms had matched us. No carefully selected photos had created first impressions. This was chemistry in its purest form, unexpected and unfiltered. The train began slowing as we approached my station. Around us, passengers gathered their belongings, preparing for the momentary chaos of exiting. Daniel and I stood motionless in our shared space, neither making a move toward the doors. So, he said, what do you think? Coffee sometime? Or are you going to make me ride this train all day? I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the cramped conditions of the subway car. Coffee sounds great, but I should probably get to work at some point today. We exchanged phones, quickly entering our contact information as the train came to a complete stop. The doors slid open, and together we stepped onto the platform, suddenly aware of how the world had continued spinning while we'd been in our private bubble. Standing on the platform, away from the forced proximity of the train, I felt suddenly shy. Daniel seemed to feel it too, a slight awkwardness creeping in now that we had space between us. So, I said, filling the silence, this is me heading uptown. I gestured vaguely toward the exit. Daniel nodded. And I'm downtown. He pointed in the opposite direction. But before we go, he hesitated, then took a step closer, eliminating the distance between us once again. I'm really glad I missed my stop this morning. The sincerity in his voice made my heart race. Me too, I replied honestly. For a moment, we stood there, surrounded by the rush of commuters, yet somehow separate from it all. Then, with a courage I didn't know I possessed, I leaned forward and pressed a quick kiss to his cheek. Text me about that coffee, I said, then turned and walked away before I could see his reaction. As I climbed the stairs toward daylight, I could feel the weight of his gaze on my back, and I couldn't stop the smile that spread across my face. My phone buzzed in my pocket before I'd even reached the street. Coffee tomorrow? Or is that too soon? The message read. I typed back immediately. Tomorrow is perfect. Looking back at this encounter, I'm struck by how easily it might never have happened. If the train had been less crowded, if Daniel had been more focused on his destination than the journey, if either of us had been too wrapped up in our phones to notice the world around us, we would have remained strangers, 2 ships passing in the night of the city. Let me tell you why these chance encounters matter so deeply. In our increasingly digital world, we've become experts at curating our experiences, filtering out the unexpected and the uncomfortable in favor of the predictable and the planned. Dating apps let us swipe through potential partners based on carefully selected criteria. Social media algorithms ensure we see content that aligns with our existing interests. Even our daily routines are optimized for efficiency rather than serendipity. But there's a magic to the unplanned, a special electricity to connections that form organically in the spaces between our scheduled lives. That morning on the subway reminded me that sometimes the most meaningful experiences are the ones we never saw coming. The ones that interrupt our carefully constructed routines and remind us that life is happening all around us, if only we're willing to look up and notice it. In the weeks that followed that first meeting, Daniel and I developed a relationship that felt both thrilling and comfortable, as if we'd known each other for years while simultaneously discovering new aspects of each other every day. We laughed about how a missed subway stop had changed the trajectory of our lives, how something as mundane as a morning commute had become the beginning of our story. And sometimes, when we ride the subway together now, we stand close even when the car is empty, a private joke and a tribute to the day we met. Occasionally, we'll catch other passengers watching us with curious expressions, perhaps wondering about the secret smile we share as the train lurches forward. I often think about all the factors that had to align for us to meet that day. If I had hit snooze one more time, if he had caught his usual earlier train, if either of us had chosen a different car, our paths might never have crossed. It makes me wonder how many potential connections we miss every day, how many life-changing encounters slip by because we're too distracted to notice them. That's why I've started making a conscious effort to be more present in my daily life, to look up from my phone more often, to make eye contact with the people I pass. Not because I'm looking for another Daniel. I'm quite happy with the one I found, but because I've realized how rich the world becomes when we open ourselves to its possibilities. The beauty of city life isn't just in its skylines and landmarks. It's in the millions of stories unfolding simultaneously, the countless lives intersecting in ways both momentary and lasting. It's in the shared experiences of strangers on a train, the silent camaraderie of commuters caught in unexpected delays, the brief exchanges that remind us of our common humanity. Daniel and I still take the same subway line most mornings, though now we coordinate our schedules to meet at my station. Sometimes we reminisce about that first day, trying to remember exactly what was said, what was felt in those electric moments of initial connection. The details may blur with time, but the feeling remains crystal clear, that sense of recognition, of finding something you didn't even know you were looking for. So the next time you're crammed into a crowded subway car, feeling the press of humanity all around you, remember that each person represents a universe of experiences, dreams, and stories. The stranger beside you could be anyone, a future friend, a potential mentor, or maybe, just maybe, someone who will choose to miss their stop just to stay in your orbit a little longer. In a world that often feels disconnected despite our constant digital communication, these real, tangible moments of human connection are more valuable than ever. They remind us that beneath our carefully constructed public personas, we're all just people looking for meaning, for understanding, for someone who sees us clearly. And sometimes, finding that person is as simple and as complicated as looking up at the right moment on a crowded train, making eye contact across a sea of strangers, and being brave enough to smile back when someone smiles at you. Because you never know, that smile might just be the beginning of a story worth telling. Total_char_count, 18,412.